I want to be clear about one thing before I tell you any of this. I am not the kind of person who hears things that aren't there. I am the kind of person who, when a colleague leaves a cable coiled the wrong way, recoils it. When a tape is logged with the wrong acquisition date, I file a correction. When a waveform shows activity in a segment that should be silent, I do not assume it's nothing. I zoom in. That's what I did. I zoomed in. And then I zoomed in further. And I kept zooming until the numbers stopped making sense, and the room got very quiet around me, and I realized that I had been sitting in my chair for 4 hours without moving. The tape was from 1967. It had been in the archive for 53 years before I touched it. It had been silent for all of that time, catalogued, stored, untouched. Whatever is on it should not be there. I have spent the last 6 weeks trying to explain it. I cannot. So I'm going to tell you what I found instead. My name is Martin Vael. I have worked at the National Radio Archive for 11 years. Before that, I spent 4 years in audio restoration, cleaning old recordings for a music licensing company, removing hiss and crackle from jazz sessions and wartime broadcasts. That job taught me something most people don't know. Tape remembers. Not metaphorically, physically. Magnetic particles on a reel retain traces of everything that was ever recorded on them. Even after erasure, even after decades of storage. Layer under layer, ghost under ghost. The archive where I work holds approximately 40,000 reels. Radio broadcasts, field recordings, government transmissions, experimental audio, dating from 1949 to 1991. My job is to digitize them, transfer the analog signal to a lossless digital format, apply noise reduction, attach metadata, archive the file, move to the next reel. I work alone. I have always preferred it that way. My workspace is a sound-treated room at the end of the building's east corridor. What used to be a broadcast booth before the station closed in 1978. The walls are covered in old acoustic foam, some of it falling apart. There's a single fluorescent light that flickers every few minutes. I've put in 3 maintenance requests. I've stopped expecting a response. The work itself is quiet. You thread the tape, you press play, you monitor the waveform on screen while the recording transfers. You watch the peaks and valleys of sound rendered as a visual line, a graph of everything that was ever said or played or breathed into a microphone 60 years ago. It's almost meditative once you know what you're looking at. I know what I'm looking at. That's why when I loaded the reel marked HB-0967-09-22-PROG04, I noticed immediately. It was in the silence. Radio silence is not random. A broadcast goes out, the host speaks, there are pauses, structured, intentional pauses between segments. These show up on the waveform as flat lines. Absolute zero. Nothing. HBC-1967-09-22-PROG-04 had activity in the flat lines. Not much. If I hadn't been watching the screen, I would have missed it. The spikes were small, barely above the noise floor. A human ear wouldn't catch them in real-time playback, but they were there, consistent, rhythmic, in every pause, every single one. I told myself it was crosstalk. Magnetic bleed from an adjacent layer. A previous recording bleeding through the oxide. It happens. It's common in older tapes. I told myself I would flag it, run the analysis, move on. I ran the analysis. I did not move on. I isolated the anomalous signal, boosted it by 30 decibels, applied a narrow band filter to cut the tape hiss, ran it through spectral repair, standard restoration process. It takes about 20 minutes to do properly. I had done this hundreds of times. This time, when I pressed play, I heard a voice. It was low, male, I think, though the processing had smoothed some of the texture out of it, speaking slowly. The words were unclear at first, degraded by decades of magnetic decay. I ran it through enhancement, boosted again, listened with the room monitors off, headphones on, volume raised until the sound filled my skull. It said,
"Not yet. Not yet. Let him finish."
I stopped the playback. I sat for a while with my headphones on and the sound off, looking at the wall. Then I checked the broadcast log for HBC-1967-09-22. Program 4 was a news summary. 22 minutes. The host name was recorded as D. Harrow. There was no second speaker listed, no call-in segment, no guests. I went back to the waveform. I stepped through the silences one by one. In the pause after the host said,
"In other developments, the City Council voted 3-1.
3-2. He has it wrong.
In the pause after the host said,
Returning after the break.
He won't return. Check the log."
I checked the log. The program notes recorded that the broadcast had ended early that night. The host had left the booth mid-segment, no reason given. D. Harrow. I looked him up in the staff records. He had died in 1968. 9 months after this broadcast. Heart failure. The voice in the tape had known. I told myself it was coincidence, confirmation bias. I was pattern matching, reading meaning into noise. I work with audio. I know how easy it is to hear words in static, faces in waveforms. Apophenia, the brain's instinct to find signal in chaos. I told myself this, and then I went home, and I lay awake until 4 in the morning. And the next day, I came back and kept working on the tape. I pulled every reel from 1967, 23 tapes, ran each one through the same isolation process. The voice was on 14 of them. Always in the silences, always between other people's words, speaking quietly as though it didn't want to be heard over the broadcast, only in the gaps, as though it had learned to fit itself into the spaces where no one was listening. I started keeping a transcript. I have it in front of me now, 41 pages. I won't read most of it, but I'll tell you what I noticed. The voice was never wrong. Every correction it made, to a date, a name, a number, a fact stated incorrectly on air, checked out. I cross-referenced against newspaper archives, council records, broadcast logs, 41 corrections across 14 tapes, 41 times, accurate. It wasn't predicting. It was correcting, in real time, in 1967 as the broadcasts happened. Whatever was in those silences had been listening very carefully. I went back further, 1961, 1955, 1952. Still there. Then I noticed something else. On 3 tapes from different years, 1963, 1958, 1952, the voice said things that didn't correspond to the broadcasts at all. Not corrections, not commentary, just statements, observations. On the 1963 tape, in a pause between 2 segments of a classical music program, the voice said,
"The light in here is wrong again. Someone should fix it."
I looked up from my screen. The fluorescent light above me flickered. I have a maintenance request in for that light. I told myself it was coincidence. I am good at telling myself things. On the 1958 tape, in a silence during a weather report, the voice said,
"He's going to check the 1952 reel next. Tell him not to."
I stopped the playback. I had not decided yet to check the 1952 reel. I had been thinking about it. I had not said it aloud. I had not written it down. The thought had existed only inside my head that morning while I was threading the 1958 tape. The 1958 recording was made 33 years before I was born. Tell him not to. I checked the 1952 reel. There were 47 reels from 1952. I pulled them all. The voice was on 31. I worked through them across 3 days. I barely left the room. I brought food. I slept in the chair twice, headphones on. The building's cleaning staff stopped knocking after the second night. The voice was different in the 1952 recordings. Not in content, the corrections, the observations, the quietly accurate interruptions into other people's broadcasts, but in something harder to define, a quality, as though it were further away, not quieter, further, as though the distance between 1952 and now were something you could hear. On the 31st reel, the last one I processed, the voice said something that stopped me completely. It said,
"We've been waiting for you for a long time, Martin."
I took my headphones off. I sat very still. The fluorescent light above me flickered twice and steadied. I have not told anyone at the archive what I found. I don't know how I would begin. There is no framework for this in the processing guidelines. There is no incident report form for a voice that should not exist, acknowledging your name across a 74-year gap. I have written 11 drafts of an email to my supervisor. I have sent none of them. I keep working. What else would I do? Last week I found a reference in the acquisition catalog to a reel marked HBC-195-1-0-1-0-7-P-ROG-01. The catalog note reads, "Earliest acquired recording in collection. Poor condition. Do not attempt transfer without specialist consultation." I have not told anyone I found it. I have not told anyone I've been thinking about it every day for a week. I have not told anyone that 3 days ago, on a tape from 1957, in a pause that lasts exactly 4 seconds, the voice said,
"When you play the first one, Martin, stay in the room." you hear. Stay in the room.
I played the 1951 tape this morning. I stayed in the room. The recording is 19 minutes long. A news program, the first broadcast this station ever transmitted. The host reads slowly, carefully, the way people read when they know history is being made, and they're not sure if their voice is adequate for it. I watched the waveform. I watched the silences. For the first 17 minutes, nothing. The silences were clean, empty, just tape hiss and the soft magnetic breath of a reel that has been sitting in a drawer for 7 decades. And then, in the pause after the host said,
This has been the first broadcast of the Harbor Broadcasting Corporation. We hope you'll join us again.
in the silence after those words, after the very last thing ever said on the first tape this archive ever acquired, the voice spoke, not a correction, not an observation, not a warning, just my name, said the way you say someone's name when you finally found them after a very long search, quietly, like relief.
Martin.
I sat in the room for a long time after the tape ended. When I got up, I noticed that the acquisition log for HBC-1-0-1-0-7-PROG01 had been updated. The condition field, which had read poor for as long as I can access the records, now reads excellent, transfer complete. I did not update that log. I don't know what happens now. I don't know what I found, or what found me, or how long it has been waiting in the spaces between other people's words. I only know that the archive is very quiet at this hour. And somewhere in the east corridor, the fluorescent light has finally stopped flickering.